Today is Monday, January 20th, 2025. It is the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday within the U.S. Dr. King is a hero, a leader of the civil rights movement, very instrumental in creating equity and equality of opportunity for people here in the U.S. and across the globe. Here at the Premier Bros, we just want to commemorate this day and his legacy and say, regardless of your race, religion, creed, color, or gender, we welcome you all. We thank you for watching. We invite you to join the Cypher. It's a global sport. It brings us all together, and we want to embody that together going forward.
We're roughly at the halfway point in the season. Table is now taking shape. Some insights to be gleaned from that. No better place to start than the number one position in the table. We all know who residing in that position at the moment. The great Liverpool, helmed by the fantastic performances of Mo Salah this season. Liverpool, the last few games, don't seem as infallible as they have been earlier in the season. And,
right.
The question is, are they starting to hit a bit of a slump? We see Mo Salah, who's played, I don't know if he's played every game, but he's played a significant number of games this season. You're starting to see his numbers drop off slightly. Of course, it's difficult to expect him to maintain those numbers throughout the entirety of the season. We talked about it earlier, that Liverpool, historically, they've fallen off the pace in the second half of seasons. Is this going to be another one of those occurrences? They still have a sizable lead. The question for Liverpool is, if and when Mo Salah has a dip in form, will the team have a dip in form? We saw in the last game against Brentford that Salah didn't have as impactful of a game as he usually does, and Liverpool barely crossed the line, but they did cross the line. Darwin Núñez came off the bench, his energetic self, was able to score a brace in the dying moments of the game. They've shown that they have some depth, particularly in their offensive unit.
Yeah, when listening to your comments, it makes me think about one of our earlier episodes when you actually brought up the question, does Liverpool rely too heavily on Mo Salah? Mo Salah, he has plateaued, and you're right. He's played a lot of games this season. He's on the pitch virtually every minute of every game. And at 32 years old, he has to tire. And the question about Liverpool is of whether or not they can sustain this level of top play when Mo is not firing at full throttle seems like the answer is probably. I think the reason for that is because of the depth of the squad. You brought up Darwin Núñez. Not every team has a Darwin that can come off the bench who, when he's in form and able to shoot the ball on frame, is as lethal as anybody. So we saw in the game against Brentford very strong at home, very organized. At many points in that game, they had 11 men behind the ball defending against Liverpool. And we saw Slot go to his bench. He brought on Darwin. He brought on Harvey Elliott. He brought on Curtis Jones. And they were able to change the game and overcome Brentford in the dying moments of the game, and that's the hallmark of a champion. I see the prospects for Liverpool being very bright because of that depth.
The second place in the table being held at the moment by Arsenal, and Arsenal win at the North London Derby against a struggling Tottenham team that they should be beating. And then an at-home fixture against Aston Villa, a very good Aston Villa side. Villa with a very strong team, strong lineup, compact in the midfield with Onana, Kamara, and Tielemans. So quality on the pitch for Villa. Arsenal were able to overcome that quality, got themselves a 2-goal lead, but ultimately weren't able to withstand Villa's persistence. Dominated much of the game, but some defensive lapses. Villa got back into the game and were able to get a draw. For Arsenal, we have to revisit the question about their transfer activity. We see Arsenal maybe not having enough depth. Yes, they have been particularly unfortunate this season with injuries. Their starting lineup has been ravished by injuries. Having that continuity has been very difficult for Arsenal to achieve. To win a Premier League season, you need not only to have great performances, you do need a bit of good fortune as well. The footballing gods really haven't been shining on Arsenal this season. They've had some unfortunate officiating as well. So,
that's arguable. That's arguable.
Well. I mean, you had some questionable officiating. Either way, you know what I mean? And if you have a fortunate season, you don't have as many of those questionable calls. So this hasn't been a fortunate season for Arsenal, particularly with injuries. And we have to look back at the transfer window in the summer. And could Arsenal have foreseen the situation that they found themselves in? Were they prepared enough for the possibility of having to face a season with some key injuries? And the answer is no. They have not been prepared. Now they have an opportunity in this window, and it's a little bit desperate at this moment to try to solve all these problems in the January window. But it's been clear for some time for many Arsenal critics that they need to strengthen up top. They need more offensive options. And the results are telling. In two of the last games where they're in the lead and probably should have put the game out of reach, just didn't have the offensive capabilities to do so. And with a makeshift back line, Villa were able to exploit that. With the usual starters, Arsenal probably wouldn't concede those two goals. The team is struggling, ravaged with injuries. And as a result, we have to question their depth to compete for the title. So they're still in second place. All is not lost, but they need some reinforcements if they're really going to push on and challenge Liverpool.
With Arsenal, we see a team that doesn't look fluid, doesn't look like the team that we saw in the last two seasons. And the one player I want to call out here is Declan Rice. Last season, for me, arguably a player of the year candidate in the Premier League. One of the best players in the league, top 5 for me, for sure. This season, I'm just not seeing the same level of play. When you see a dip in form from a player like that, it has a knock-on effect on the rest of the team. When your big players are not playing like big players, is it possible to win the Premier League? I think the answer is no. To win the Premier League, you have to be in top form. You have to have your top players firing and leading the charge. And right now, when I think about Rice, when I think about Martin Odegaard, the way he's been looking recently, these guys, while they're still good, better than the average, they're not playing at an elite level. I think that will get Arsenal to the title. The good news.
Well, let me just respond to that because I think one of the reasons why Rice has not been achieving the levels that we've seen from him the last season is in part because of the injuries that Arsenal have had. Playing in the midfield alongside of Martin Odegaard naturally allows you to do things that you can't do when you're playing without him. He opens up so much space. He dissects defenses. He allows you more space on the ball, gives you the ball in a position where you're able to utilize it a bit more effectively. So not being able to play alongside Martin Odegaard for large stretches of the early part of the season has impacted Declan Rice's game. Also, we have to bear in mind that in the summer they brought in Mikel Merino, a player who has not yet come into full form in the Premier League. He's still coming to terms with a new league, his new teammates. Declan Rice has been playing a lot alongside a player who is struggling to find his footing. So his lesser impact on the game has a lot to do with who he's playing alongside. And that, in turn, has a lot to do with the injuries that Arsenal have had. My point still stands that I think they could have tried to prepare themselves a lot better in the transfer market. A lot of Arsenal's problems have been offensively. It's not being able to break teams down offensively. And I think having different offensive options, a striker who is an out-and-out goal scorer, but maybe also a striker who can stretch defenses, who has some pace, can get in behind. Arsenal are very one-dimensional in their offensive build-up, and it's based upon the personnel that they have. They have a Martinelli. They don't use him in the way that they should. Martinelli is a sprinter. He wants to run at you. He wants to get in behind. He doesn't want to have the ball to knock it back 1-2s. That's not his game. Mm-hmm. They need guys who allow them to stretch the field so that it also lets those guys in the midfield, those creators, have more space to work. That multi-dimensional approach to attacking football is what's missing. I think that's something they could have addressed and should have addressed in the transfer window.
So given that we're in January 20th, right, and we're entering the last week of the window, who's your 9 that you would like Arsenal to target?
The players that have been linked to Arsenal are Sesko from Leipzig, seems to have the attributes of a strong number 9, potent finisher. I think we don't need to look outside of the Premier League. I'm a big admirer of 2 Brazilian centre forwards in the Premier League. One of them being Cunha. I know Arsenal were linked with him. I think he is a lethal, versatile number 9, and I think he would fit in very well. I also like João Pedro. I've talked about João Pedro in the past. I think he is a similar type of player in the sense that he's very versatile. Right? He can drop deep, can also play as a focal point in an offense, causes a lot of chaos for defenders. So if you're really trying to have an impact in half of a season, you want somebody who is used to the Premier League, right? Who doesn't need to get used to the culture, to the language, all those things. So my preference would be for a striker who's already playing in the Premier League. So those 2 players are players that I would consider as very, very good prospects. Not many would have predicted this. Forest, Nottingham Forest, doing fantastic things.
Nuno Espirito Santo.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about their manager, Nuno, in the last episode. I mean, they're still getting those wins and tied on points, actually, with Arsenal. Only goal difference is separating them at the moment. So Forest doing fantastic things. The only thing I would say for Forest right now is, looking at their fixture list, I think the next month will be the telling month for them. They have a run of games where, pretty much all teams in the top half of the table are formidable opponents, and we'll learn a lot about Nottingham Forest and their prospects at the end of the next month. If we look at the fixtures coming up for them, high-flying Bournemouth, then they play a difficult Brighton team away, Fulham at home, Newcastle, who have been in very impressive form in recent weeks. Then they travel to Arsenal, then to Man City. So that fixture list is as tough as it's going to get in the Premier League, and we will learn a lot about their credentials at the end of that run of fixtures. So let's see where they stand in a month's time. But so far, so good.
For Forest, if there are any skeletons in that closet, we're going to find them in the next month. And when we talk about depth, right, we're talking about Arsenal's depth, or talking about Liverpool's depth. Forest, I think it's pretty clear they don't have a lot of depth. They really do rely on their first 11. Nuno plays the same team week in, week out. Thankfully, they've been fit, and they've actually had that stroke of luck that you say teams need to finish high in the table. I think Ryan Yates, their captain, is the one player who's had some injury troubles, but everyone else, for the most part, has been fit. And you have to think of Chris Wood, who's over 30, going into the next several weeks. Will his legs be tired? Will he still have that spring in his step to elevate, over one of those defenders, let's say a Dan Burn on Newcastle, to nod that ball home and get that header? What I will say about Forest is every stage of this season, we've all said, well, can they do it? Can they keep on doing it? Can Chris Wood keep on scoring? Is Hudson-Odoi and Elanga, two players who didn't quite make it at Chelsea and Manchester United respectively, are they good enough? They've answered all those questions really emphatically as a yes. And the most impressive part of the team has really been their defense, right? We've talked about the back four: Aina, Milenkovic, Murillo, Williams, and the goalkeeper, Matt Sells. If these guys stay fit, I see them doing quite well actually in this run. Maybe not cranking out victory after victory, but if they're able to get some draws, maybe a win, they should still be in and around the top four. And when we think about Nottingham Forest and what is the North Star for them, what even the aspirational target for them at the end of the season, is it the title or is it the top four? I would say it's the top four. With a team that doesn't have depth, I just don't think that they'll have enough to get over the finish line for the title. But for the top four, if all the ducks fall in a row and they continue to have the same luck that they've had, they very well could finish in the Champions League place for next season.
Manchester City, a team who everyone thought would be at the top of the table this season, or thereabouts. They've won 3 of their last 4 Premier League games, albeit against opponents in the bottom half of the table. Getting some players back from injury, getting a run of games for their star players, Foden scoring, De Bruyne getting a few games under his belt. So the on-field results have been positive. They've been able to, make up a bit of ground in the table. The off-field events also favorable. Not only their leader, Pep Guardiola, signing an extension, but, their star striker, Erling Haaland, signing a lengthy contract extension. So, City at the moment, you would say that the ship has been steadied. I want to see them take some points off of their rivals. That's what City need to do at the moment. They need to start beating teams that are close to them or around them in the table. But I think at Etihad, the dark days seem to be a thing of the past. The crisis has been averted, and they're in a good moment.
What will be a real test for them is exactly what you said: getting points off the rivals, right, and climbing the table by beating their competition for the top 4. City have a very, very difficult run of fixtures. We were talking about the difficult run for Forest. I think the only team probably that has a more difficult run is Manchester City, playing against the likes of Newcastle and others that are in and around them, competing for those coveted spots. One thing I think that is a benefit for them is the clarity that they're getting from some of the things you mentioned. Pep is staying, Haaland is staying, Kyle Walker is leaving, asked to leave the club. Now they have clarity in that back line. There's no more rotation in the right back spot. Pep being Pep, playing a back 3 sometimes playing a back 4. We don't know really what's on his mind, and in what's driving some of those decisions, but I think he's trying to find the right recipe. And we know that when he tinkers enough, he usually comes up with something that's quite remarkable in terms of the final product. Manchester City going forward, again, playing against the top tier teams, I think that will be the test. I wouldn't bet against them. I see them finding their footing again, finding their confidence, finding the connection and chemistry between the players. And that's something to watch out for and actually something for the Premier League to fear.
Stepping outside of the top four, recent news, Manchester United last couple of weeks played against Southampton, a team at the bottom of the league. Struggled to get a win there, just barely made it over the line with help from Ahmad hat-trick in the dying embers of the game. So dodged a huge bullet there. Got a win against Arsenal, 10 men down, hard-fought win. Well done in that game. And then FA Cup, right. And then played Brighton and got outclassed. Brighton.
Outclassed.
Yeah, they got outclassed.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
Well, from my standpoint,
but okay.
Well, I mean, okay, 3-1 at home. Brighton didn't look like they had any real threat of losing the game. To be honest with you, they were super comfortable in that game. It seemed threatened at all, actually. So, in light of the recent events, the manager has come out and said that this is the worst team in the history of Manchester United. Now, I have a question to you as a United supporter. I've been critical about the players at United, the quality of the players at United. Now we have their manager coming to a similar conclusion, probably even a little bit stronger than I would have stated. Now, I don't know, how much Amorim has been following United and its history. So that statement, I don't know how much credence I give to the actual statement, but the message was clear. Was a resounding message, and that was that he doesn't believe in these players. The question I want to ask essentially is, what's your take on a manager coming out and saying that his team is the worst team in the history of the club? I mean, usually we see a manager shielding his players from too much criticism, trying to, protect them, to keep that unity.
I think it's naive from Ruben Amorim. I think each coach has to strike a balance between using the media to motivate the players through positive and negative reinforcement. And what we're seeing from Ruben Amorim is a brutal honesty that would be consistent with someone who hasn't been in the British media for an extended period of time. That type of statement to talk about the history of Manchester United, which I believe is 127 years, is a statement that's going to make news. It's going to alienate players. It's going to cause a stir in the boardroom. For him, I think it would be wise to kind of back off and say, hey, that's not what I meant. I was just trying to say we are perceived as one of the worst teams in Manchester United history. And maybe in this moment, in this game where we couldn't really get a foothold at home against Brighton, we looked like one of the worst teams. But all in all, I think it was the wrong approach by Ruben Amorim, because we can't forget what just happened in the last few weeks. A draw against Liverpool, top of the table team, a fantastic display, and then to go into the FA Cup away from home against Arsenal and to get a result there. You have to take those positives, and instead of focusing on the negative, say who we really are is who we were against Liverpool, who we were against Arsenal. And what we need to do as a team is to build that consistency, build that core that will allow us to have decent results even when we don't play well. And Manchester United did not play well against Brighton. They didn't threaten. I agree they didn't look like they would win the game really at any point. But the negative rhetoric, I don't think it's paying dividends. And we look at Marcus Rashford, and I keep on bringing this up. The negative approach to Marcus Rashford hasn't paid off. Paid off. The team needs a player like Marcus Rashford, and he's not available. And I'm not saying it's Ruben Amorim's fault, because I'm sure he's seen something behind the scenes that caused him to make this decision, and he's the coach. He has the right to do that. But being self-aware and understanding how impactful the words of the Manchester United manager are is something that Ruben Amorim is learning on the job. We see him making a little bit of a gaffe, but I think he'll get past this and hopefully steady the ship going forward and get some more consistent performances from the team. That's a wrap. Premier Bros signing off. Thanks for joining. Subscribe, and we'll see you next time.